We now come to the backbench debate on the potential merits of awarding a posthumous Victoria Cross to Blair Mayne. Jim Shannon to move.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I move that the potential merits of awarding a posthumous Victoria Cross to Blair Mayne be considered. First of all, can I just say, Madam Deputy Speaker, pleasure to serve under your chairship. Can I thank the Backbench Committee very much for the opportunity, and I thank those members who have taken the time before recess to come in and make a contribution. And truly I'm thankful for the recognition of the importance of this debate in this chamber today. This is not merely about a Newtownards boy and his exploits, which I will tell. This is about how we as a House honour our veteran sea heroes and ensure that the honour is properly recorded. At a time when veterans feel that their service is a thing of shame, the importance of this recognition goes to every service personnel member throughout this country. I know that means so much to so many in Newtownards, in my hometown of Strangford, and I'm thankful it's been deemed worthy of this debate here in the greatest seat of democracy. Just say I'm very pleased to see the Minister in his place, the honourable and gallant honourable member that he is, and we thank him for coming along. And also pleased to see the two shadow ministers in their place as well. I'm no writer, Madam Deputy Speaker. Damien Lewis, whose work in Blair Mayne and the foundation of the SAS is unparalleled. However, allow this Ballywalter boy to retell the stories I heard by old men in the town rhyme off in my youth as a crowd of us listened in awe of how one of us could achieve so much. If you were 8, 9, 10-year-old and you had all these old soldiers in the Second World War and they were telling you all these great stories and you just always wanted to be a Royal Marine, as I did as a wee boy, I wanted to be a Royal Marine Commando. I never achieved that, by the way. The honourable gentleman did, and I managed to get to the Ulster Defence Regiment and the Royal Artillery. And they weren't second best, by the way, but weren't as good as what I wanted as an 8-year-old. But when you listen to the stories of those soldiers, I asked members to very quickly, in a brief moment, a scene of what happened. The air is filled with the screams of dying and the stench of the dead. You're gasping for breath as your lungs intake gulps of gunpowder-tinged air. You're lying in a ditch. The enemy is firing so often without break that the rat-tat-tat of bullets emerges together. You know that each searing breath may well be your last. The officer you look for direction is dead. Deep in your heart, you believe that it will take a miracle to lift you from this scene of hell. Suddenly, you hear something different. You hear the roaring of an engine, of a jeep. With your last vestige of energy, you lift your head with stinging eyes. You make out the form of a jeep that is cutting through the madness and the mayhem. The man on board fires at the enemy like an avenging angel. He slows down the jeep down to the ditch. On his way past, he calls, "I'll pick you up on the way back." Nothing flowery, no grand words, just a promise that he gives you that perhaps it is not time for you to go just yet. With a hammering heart, you watch as the man in the jeep forces the enemy to retreat, despite the fact that the enemy holds all the advantages of position, men and firepower. And as the enemy retreats, the jeep turns round. This time it stops. The avenging angel jumps to the ground amid a hail of bullets and holds out his hand. Shaking, you grasp that hand as you're bundled in with your 11 colleagues and driven widely to safety. As you look to see what form your angel takes, you see this a crazy Ulsterman. We're not all crazy, by the way, but we're all very brave. I wouldn't be as brave as this man. It is Paddy Mayne, and everything falls into place just in that 1 second. It's a man who is known for bravery and courage and for leading his men to victory. A man who is, and in your eyes and the eyes of your surviving family, will forever remain a hero of epic fame. The story is one of the true stories of Lieutenant Colonel Paddy Blair Mayne. Actions are seen from one of the men who was saved by Colonel Mayne, or Paddy as he was affectionately known. The story does not take into account the fact that before Colonel Mayne and Lieutenant Scott had driven the jeep into oncoming enemy fire, Mayne had summed up the city. That was what he could do. He could lead from the front as a soldier, as a leader of soldiers, but also with the courage and determination. He was a man who was born for that time. Ever a man of initiative and action, he entered the first house that had formed the enemy defences, and after checking to ensure that the enemy was dead, he moved out into the open and fired into the next house, taking out those behind the enemy fire before moving in to ensure that none of the enemy remained. That man, that colossus of a man, was Paddy Blair Mayne. Stood tall and commanded his men, and inspired bravery and loyalty. After ensuring that clean sweep, he turned his attention to how best to save the trapped men, point men of the squadron. He knew that the enemy was well ensconced in the forest, and with no way to surround them, he departed on what seemed to be a suicide mission in order to rescue those men. Not only did Paddy manage to rescue his colleagues, but he forced a retreat from the enemy, and he helped the Allies advance
at a time when they were held up. So it's said that a level 1 award such as the Victoria Cross is only given when the chance of death is 50%. A report from Brigadier Calvert in June 45 said, there can only be one explanation why Colonel Mayne was not killed by what already had proved deadly and concentrated fire. The sheer audacity and daring which he showed in driving his jeep across a field of fire, momentarily bewildering the enemy. He also continued, Colonel Mayne, from the time he arrived, dominated the scene. That was the man he was. When he was there, he had no fear. His cheerfulness always, his resolution, his unsurpassed courage in this action was an inspiration to us all. That was the soldiers who watched this colossus of a man jump out and save them and rescue them and win the day for the Allies in their advance in Germany. Undoubtedly, it was a suicidal mission to rescue his comrades and ensure that the enemy retreated further. Colonel Mayne's mission was a complete success. In the words of Brigadier Calvert, he said, not only did he save the lives of the wounded, but he also completely defeated and destroyed the enemy. That's the man. Colonel Mayne's story is the stuff of which legends are made. Legends that we know to be true, but we as boys in Newtownards and Ballywater many years ago looked to that to be that person. It's the stuff of which many of us dreamed as young boys and acted out in our gardens. Blair Mayne was certainly a hero of mine as a young child many years ago. His actions were those of a man who put others first, and he did do that and went above and beyond the call of duty. There's absolutely no doubt that his actions on that day were heroic and worthy of recognition and commendation. And that is why Brigadier Calvert recommended that Mayne be awarded the highest award, the Victoria Cross. Mayne was informed that he was to be granted that well-deserved accolade, and he informed his mother accordingly, which made, of course, his mum even more proud. And who's more proud of you than your mum? Whatever you do is just great, because your mum thinks whatever you do is brilliant. And that's, my mum's the same. But, I hope it's true, by the way. I shall explain why I've told the war story. There's a reason for it. I want to do that because it's a factual historical account. Why the BBC have a global success in their Rogue Heroes dramatisation about a founding member of a covert special raiding squadron, a hero many times over, who reputed to have single-handedly destroyed 130 enemy planes and was commended for the highest military award. The reason is that 6 months later, a terrible mistake happened. The mistake stripped Blair Mayne of his hard-won honour and much of his self-esteem. The award of Victoria Cross by the 1931 Royal Warrant is bestowed upon those who display acts of conspicuous gallantry and for a signal act of valour in the presence of the enemy. Paddy Mayne more than attained that standard. But the mistake lies with the word signal, which is defined in the Oxford English Dictionary as an event or a statement that provides the impulse or occasion for something to happen. So it was not a planned event. Mayne certainly qualified for the award. However, the word signal was misread as single. Now, as a clerical error, and we're very clearly putting forward this viewpoint, Mayne had been accompanied in the jeep by Lieutenant Scott, who provided covering fire and therefore had not acted single-handedly, which meant that he was deemed to be ineligible for the award. The change has been queried at a number of levels over the years, and yet it appears that alteration resulted in Mayne being stripped of the award. Instead, he was given a third bar to his DSO. I have seen the evidence. Lieutenant Colonel Blair Mayne was supposed to get the Victoria Cross. On his citation, VC was marked but stroked out for the commendation. That is important evidence. A team of historians have been working hard in sourcing these documents, and I've made them available to the Minister this morning, although to be fair, I think the Minister had them beforehand, so he's got 2 copies of it now in relation to it. I cry the thanks, and I want to put on record the thanks to Damien Lewis, to Patrick McGonigal, who's a grandson of one of the SAS originals, and David Robinson, among so many other local historians invested in this issue. Brigadier Calvert recommended Mayne should be awarded the VC for his actions in rescuing his men. He submitted signed statements from 3 officers who witnessed it: Lieutenant Scott, Lieutenant Lockett and Lieutenant Surrey Dane. Calvert refers to the difficulty of assessing the military significance of Mayne's actions in relation to the overall thrust of the Canadian Division. I enclose a citation from the VC for Paddy Mayne. I quote, "I've gone into this thoroughly with his officers, and I think it was an outstanding piece of work. One almost expects these things from Paddy Mayne. The main point is, however, is how much it affected the battle." Simmons agreed with him. Major General Vokes also wrote in support of the citation. In his opinion, Mayne's spirited leadership and dash were a most important contribution to the success of the operation. And I observed the very marked respect and regard in which he was held by his officers and men. In my opinion, the officer is worthy of the highest award for gallantry and leadership. Whether Rogue Heroes on TV, Madam Deputy Speaker, really betrayed Blair Mayne in the way he should have been. He never used bad language, for instance, but he was portrayed as a leader of men, and nobody could ever have any doubt that he was a man that led his soldiers and give leadership and give confidence and encouragement to those who were around him. The citation was also signed by Brigadier Calvert, Major General Vokes, Lieutenant General Simmons, General Greyhard, Commander 1st Canadian Army, and Field Marshal Montgomery, 21st Army Group. It says here, I have clearly outlined that officials overseeing misinterpreted the VC rules as it needed to be a single act of valour, whereas it was in fact a signal act of valour. The difference is in that wording. We're not here to throw dispersions, we're here to outline the system and how it works and how clerical error led to this happening. That means the denial was based upon a procedural error or an error of misunderstanding, and therefore the wrongdoing that needs to be properly readdressed. One historian has noted it was clear that the VC had been marked out because of that clerical error. Therefore, Madam, I do think it's important that we note that I seek not to ask the MOD or Magistrate to overturn the entire apple cart of no retrospective reconsiderations. We are simply asking for an error to be corrected in this case, specifically, singularly. Whilst we are all aware of other posthumous VCs being granted, for instance, Private Richard Norton was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross for Australia, VC, for his bravery during the Second World War. His bravery during the Vietnam War, specifically for his actions during the Battle of Fire Support Base Coral in 1968. The basis is that an error occurred which can be corrected. We're not the only people who cannot understand why the medal was not awarded. King George the Sixth asked, how was it that the Victoria Cross eluded Paddy? And he inquired as to why the award was downgraded. When the King asked Winston Churchill to explain the demerit, Churchill was said to have been shocked and saddened by the glaring omission. Inquiries were also made by several officers who also could not understand what had happened. They did not have the access that we now have to the files, which clearly show the intent and the redirect. In short, while a signal act of valour was originally specified, a single act of valour never was. So the clerical error is the reason and the thrust of what we're asking for. For most conspicuous bravery or some daring or preeminent act of valour or self-sacrifice or extreme devotion to duty in the presence of the enemy. What a man and what a hero and what a courageous person with bravery many will never witness, but that I as a wee boy just wish to be. All of which were confirmed by the witnesses involved in reporting on Blair's actions at Oldenburg, and thirdly, that the VC can be awarded posthumously. So those three reasons, the single word, but also the VC would be awarded for conspicuous bravery, which is never in doubt, and the Victoria Cross can be awarded posthumously. There are no other recorded reasons as to why the recommendations to award a VC was not actioned. Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth's uncle, Major General Sir Robert Laycock, who at the time was a serving officer in the forces, wrote a letter in which he stated that Blair Mayne deserved the Victoria Cross. He earned it. He earned it with his bravery, and would have received one had the proper authorities, specifically, I say this very respectfully, always do that, knowing their job. As a consequence, Blair Mayne did not receive the greatest honour that his country can bestow. No matter how much being awarded the highest French allocated meant to have been given and then stripped of, his British honour haunted Mayne for the rest of his life. The memory of Blair Mayne lies on, not just through the BBC series, but many in my town argue that whilst Blair Mayne was rough, he would have never have cursed in front of a lady, and his comrades did not fear, but instead revered him. Indeed, his memory is cherished in Ard's people's hearts, and there's a statue of Blair Mayne in Newton Ard's town centre. His image now adorns walls that once boasted murals depicting paramilitary paraphernalia. Blair Mayne's history, his service in uniform, his bravery and his conviction are on the walls of Newton Ard and many of the community centres. When the council decided to build a new leisure centre, it was named the Blair Mayne Leisure Centre. Why? His sporting prowess is something of pride to us all. When a coffee shop opened a couple of years ago in Newton Ard's town centre, was called Colonel Paddy's. Why? Because we all revere him and their coffee, by the way, is excellent, and I live in coffee and fried eggs. So this is because his legacy is important to the people of our wee town. Members may be aware that under Rule 40.12 of the Civil Procedure Clerk, clerical mistakes in judgments or orders or errors arising from any accidental slip or omission explicitly permits fixing such errors. This is really important. This is the thrust of the debate and why we're bringing it forward. as long as the intent of the original decision holds. So the original decision was to allow the VC. The law allows for slips of the pen to be corrected. Letting an error stand, as in this case, perpetuates, I believe, an injustice, especially if the mistake skewed the outcome which it has. I conclude with this. I'm very clear of the time that you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and others asked me to conform within, and I'll do that. It is said that King George VI asked him how it was that he had not received the Victoria Cross, and he answered in a manner, I believe, that sums up this courageous and honourable man, as he was. I serve to my best, my Lord, my King and my Queen, and none can take that honour away from me. Today, in this House, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have a chance to restore and replace that which was his. It is time that the memory of a man who lived for his colleagues and his country was restored to its full glory through the restitution of the Victoria Cross.
The question is, as on the order paper. Dr Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for Strangford for both securing this debate and opening it in such a way. I know this is an incredibly important subject to him, and his retelling of Paddy's activities during war, it was almost like I could almost see the commando comic before me from my childhood. So well done for the way you did it. I don't intend to speak too long. It's really just a long intervention I have here. So the member for Strangford asked me to support this debate. I didn't really know who Paddy Mayne was. And I have to say, whilst the member for Strangford is a lovely guy, his politics can be a little bit dodgy sometimes. So rather than saying yes on the spot, I did decide to do some homework. And you could see quite quickly that the case is strong, of course. And I felt bad even having to research it, actually. I spoke to my son when I got home that week, and he did very politely point out to me that we'd watched a TV programme about Paddy Mayne together, and also my son had bought me a book for my Christmas about Paddy Mayne, which I've still not read. But don't tell him. And then the week after that, I was visiting Redford Barracks in Edinburgh South West, and I met a serviceman there from Northern Ireland, and I took the opportunity to ask him what he thought. And he was offended that I even had to ask him about it because he felt the case was so strong. And whilst I don't speak for him, he was a little bit upset about the way Paddy was depicted in the second of the Rogue Heroes series, actually. And he made the point about the language specifically. I've asked residents in my constituency what they thought about this debate today and what the trajectory should be. And overwhelmingly, people did get back and say the case was strong. There was a real feeling that Paddy was overlooked because he was sometimes forthright with his opinions, sometimes challenged authority, which is not always a good thing in the forces, I guess, but above all because his face didn't fit sometimes. And one of my constituents did say to me, they said that Paddy deserves this, but if he does win it, it's a victory for all the other people who were overlooked because they went to the wrong school or came from the wrong background, and that counted against them. So I think I'm very happy to give way.
Can I thank my honourable friend for giving way? I think, like him, I would agree with the need to make sure research is done. And actually, for this, the podcast, We Have Ways of Making You Talk, does a much better introduction to Paddy Mayne. But my main intervention is, does he agree with me that actually what we need to be making sure we're looking at the moment as well, picking up his point, look at the current rules of recognition for those serving in the Special Forces and making sure some of the difficulties that will arise with public recognition for these very brave troops are taken into account going forward?
Dr Scott Arthur.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention in it, and I'll try to listen to that podcast on the train home this evening. But, I mean, the issue around Special Forces does often come up, but I mean, I have absolute trust in them to follow the rules of engagement and also the rules of war at all times, and I respect them and all our armed forces for the work they do. So the case is strong, and I just want to conclude by saying that we're not here today, of course, to demand that Paddy gets a VC on behalf of himself or of all these other people who are perhaps been overlooked, particularly in the year which is the 80th anniversary of the Second World War, of course. What we're here today saying is it's time to look at this with fresh eyes, formally, not here in this House, but people who understand this much better than us, and ensure that a fair decision is reached. But I do think the member for Strangford has been very clear about perhaps what that fair decision should be. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Robin Swan.